I'm now going to turn the meeting over to our co-moderator, not Ruthie, John.
Okay. Hello, everybody. I'm John. I'm definitely an alcoholic. First of all, I'd like to welcome everyone here tonight. It's going to be a good night tonight. We're on page 48 in the big book, and for you people that are new in the program, we just started the book not too long ago. We're right now on step 2, and this chapter that we're into, about the middle of it, is We Agnostics. And like I said last week, Alcoholics Anonymous is not a religious program. We are spiritual. But I know when I came in, someone mentioned the word God, and I freaked out a little bit. But it says that we have your own conception of a higher power. So we're going to talk about what you believe in today, and it says, this last paragraph said, here are some good reasons that you should have a power greater than yourself. And we'll get into a little bit more about this now. It's going to be a little bit on the boring side, but later on in the next couple pages, we're going to find out where you find God. And let me give you a little hint about that. You don't have to go too far at all. Not too far at all. So we're right down in the middle of page 48. And it says the practical individual.
The practical individual of today is a stickler for facts and results. Nevertheless, the 20th century readily accepts theories of all kinds, provided they are firmly grounded in fact. We have numerous theories, for example, about electricity. Everybody believes them without a murmur of doubt. Why this ready acceptance? Simply because it is impossible to explain what we see, feel, direct, and use without a reasonable assumption as a starting point. Everybody nowadays believes in scores of assumptions for which there is good evidence, but no perfect visual proof. And does not science demonstrate that visual proof is the weakest proof? It is being constantly revealed, as mankind studies the material world, that outward appearances are not inward reality at all. To illustrate, the prosaic steel girder is a mass of electrons whirling around each other at incredible speed. These tiny bodies are governed by precise laws, and these laws hold true throughout the material world. Science tells us so. We have no reason to doubt it. When, however, the perfectly logical assumption is suggested that underneath the material world and life as we see it, there is an all-powerful, guiding, creative intelligence. Right there, our perverse streak comes to the surface, and we laboriously set out to convince ourselves it isn't so. We read wordy books and indulge in windy arguments, thinking we believe this universe needs no God to explain it. Were our contentions true, it would follow that life originated out of nothing, means nothing, and proceeds nowhere. Instead of regarding ourselves as intelligent agents, spearheads of God's ever-advancing creation, we agnostics and atheists chose to believe that our human intelligence was the last word, the Alpha and the Omega, the beginning and end of all. Rather vain of us, wasn't it? We who have traveled this dubious path beg you to lay aside prejudice, even against organized religion. We have learned that whatever the human frailties of various faiths may be, those faiths have given purpose and direction to millions. People of faith have a logical idea of what life is all about. Actually, we used to have no reasonable conception whatever. We used to amuse ourselves by cynically dissecting spiritual beliefs and practices, when we might have observed that many spiritually minded persons of all races, colors, and creeds were demonstrating a degree of stability, happiness, and usefulness which we should have sought ourselves. Instead, we looked at the human defects of these people and sometimes used their shortcomings as a basis of wholesale condemnation. We talked of intolerance, while we were intolerant ourselves. We missed the reality and the beauty of the forest because we were diverted by the ugliness of some of its trees. We never gave the spiritual side of life a fair hearing.
So what they're telling us here is to keep an open mind when it comes to spirituality. And that people of faith have a more positive attitude. And there's something I realized too, is that we have certain things. To have faith is to know. All right. Now, first, on step 2, you come to believe in a power greater than yourself. You have a belief. And in order to know, you have to go through some sort of action. It don't even start with a belief. It starts with suspicion. Now, and Ruthie had a good example of this, of how you come to believe in something and then you know something. You know, when you get to step 12, you know you have faith. It's sort of like Paul over here. Well, actually, I'll use me and I'll use Paul as an example on one of my stories. I just got a different car out here, all right? And I just found out that my heat wasn't working right, all right? So I went to Paul, all right, with the suspicion that Paul knows something about cars, all right? Now, Paul, I asked him, and he said, well, you go to this guy down the road here. It's Joe Blow's mechanic shop down on Summit, Northwest, or whatever, and he'll fix you right up. So I go to Joe Blow's place, knowing that Paul sent me there, and I have a suspicion that it's going to be okay. All right? So I go there. Joe Blow fixes up my heat. All right? Runs good for a while. Running around good. And it's real good. All right. So now, all of a sudden, something happens. I get a raise. So I want to get rid of this car I just fixed. Get another one. This is a little newer. So I get another one. Guess what? My brakes go out on this other one. So now I don't have to go to Paul. I go directly to Joe Blow's mechanic. And I know that he's going to fix it right because I have faith. So that's how this program starts out with. We have a suspicion that maybe this is going to work. All right. There's a lot of people here that have that suspicion that they do. But you got to be willing to believe that it will. Then once you take some action and see some result from the steps, you have faith and you know. So that's sort of an example how this belief thing works. Now another thing that I found out too is about. Someone told me that AA was like altered attitudes. Someone told me what you believe, you become. All right, now I have a certain system in the morning when I wake up. I do rituals and everything, and I try to have a positive attitude. Now, nowadays, back in my days when I was in my prime and doing my drug and everything, I wake up in the morning and I believe that something bad got to happen. I'm going to do this wrong. I'm going to go to jail. A lot of negativity. But today I have different beliefs in my life. I wake up and I say my prayers and I say everything, and I believe that today is going to be a good day. And most of the time that happens because I change my beliefs. So remember that. AA means altered attitude. What you believe, you become. So change your beliefs. And that's what this step 2 is about.
In our personal stories, you will find a wide variation in the way each teller approaches and conceives of the power which is greater than himself.
So you hear someone speak at a meeting? This is supposed to be what they're supposed to talk about. How they found a power greater than themselves in their program.
Whether we agree with a particular approach or conception seems to make little difference. Experience has taught us that these are matters about which, for our purpose, we need not be worried. They are questions for each individual to settle for himself. On one proposition, however, these men and women are strikingly agreed. Every one of them has gained access to and believes in a power greater than himself. This power has in each case accomplished the miraculous, the humanly impossible. As a celebrated American statesman put it, Let's look at the record. Here are thousands of men and women, worldly indeed. They flatly declare that since they have come to believe in a power greater than themselves, to take a certain attitude toward that power, and to do certain simple things, there has been a revolutionary change in their way of living and thinking.
That is a promise. And it says right there, nothing about drinking or drugging. It says they have a change in their attitude and their way of thinking. And here's a promise from that.
In the face of collapse and despair, in the face of a total failure of their human resources, they found that a new power, peace, happiness, and sense of direction flowed into them. This happened soon after they wholeheartedly met a few simple requirements.
Steps.
Once confused and baffled by the seeming futility of existence, they show the underlying reasons why they were making heavy going of life. Leaving aside the drink question, they tell why living was so unsatisfactory. They show how the change came over them. When many hundreds of people are able to say that the consciousness of the presence of God is today the most important fact of their lives, they present a powerful reason why one should have faith. This world of ours has made more material progress in the last century than in all the millenniums which went before. Almost everyone knows the reason. Students of ancient history tell us that the intellect of men in those days was equal to the best of today. Yet in ancient times, material progress was painfully slow. The spirit of modern scientific inquiry, research, and invention was almost unknown. In the realm of the material, men's minds were fettered by superstition, tradition, and all sorts of fixed ideas. Some of the contemporaries of Columbus thought a round earth preposterous. Others came near putting Galileo to death for his astronomical heresies.
Ruthie once mentioned here too, and she found some words that Columbus, the guy that discovered the world, was an alcoholic too. And the reason I want to know why is, all right, now this is some of the ways that we were doing when we were in our prime. First of all, he left where he was, not going where the hell he went. And when he got there, he didn't know where the hell he was. And then a woman financed his trip twice. So definitely was an alcoholic. So, Columbus.
We ask ourselves this: are not some of us just as biased and unreasonable about the realm of the spirit as were the ancients about the realm of the material? Even in the present century, American newspapers were afraid to print an account of the Wright brothers' first successful flight of Kitty Hawk. Had not all efforts at flight failed before? Did not Professor Langley's flying machine go to the bottom of the Potomac River? Was it not true that the best mathematical minds had proved man could never fly? Had not people said God had reserved this privilege to the birds? Only 30 years later, the conquest of the air was almost an old story, and airplane travel was in full swing. But in most fields, our generation has witnessed complete liberation of our thinking. Show any longshoreman a Sunday supplement describing a proposal to explore the moon by means of a rocket, and he will say, I bet they do it. Maybe not so long either. Is not our age characterized by the ease with which we discard old ideas for new? By the complete readiness with which we throw away the theory or gadget which does not work for something new which does? We had to ask ourselves why we shouldn't apply to our human problems this same readiness to change our point of view.
This next paragraph an example of a dry drunk.
We were having trouble with personal relationships. We couldn't control our emotional natures. We were a prey to misery and depression. We couldn't make a living. We had a feeling of uselessness. We were full of fear. We were unhappy. We couldn't seem to be a real help to other people. Was not a basic solution of these bedevilments more important than whether we should see newsreels of lunar flight? Of course it was. When we saw others solve their problems by a simple reliance upon the spirit of the universe, we had to stop doubting the power of God. Our ideas did not work, but the God idea did.
Ain't that the truth? When we try it ourselves, did it work? Well, it said right there, but the God idea did.
The Wright brothers' almost childish faith that they could build a machine which would fly was the mainspring of their accomplishment. Without that, nothing could have happened. We agnostics and atheists were sticking to the idea that self-sufficiency would solve our problems. When others showed us that God's sufficiency worked with them, we began to feel like those who had insisted the Wrights would never fly. This is the end of CD 2.
And I forgot to mention earlier that agnostic means doubt the existence of God, and atheist means deny the existence of God.
Logic is great stuff. We liked it. We still like it. It is not by chance we were given the power to reason, to examine the evidence of our senses, and to draw conclusions. That is one of man's magnificent attributes. We agnostically inclined would not be satisfied with a proposal which does not lend itself to reasonable approach and interpretation. Hence, we are at pains to tell why we think our present faith is reasonable, why we think it more sane and logical to believe than not to believe, why we say our former thinking was soft and mushy when we threw up our hands in doubt and said, when we became alcoholics, crushed by a self-imposed crisis we could not postpone or evade, we had to fearlessly face the proposition that either God is everything or else he is nothing. God either is or he isn't.
That is step 2. Either God is everything or is nothing. Either is or he isn't. What choice was ours?
What was our choice to be? Arrived at this point, we were squarely confronted with a question of faith. We couldn't duck the issue. Some of us had already walked far over the bridge of reason toward the desired shore of faith.
And here's some promises, and also, there's no pictures in the book, but our home group hands them out. Here's the desired shore of faith. Starts out with the conclusions of step 1 and 2. You have a belief. Then you get to step 3, and you make a decision. And we turn our will over. Then we take some action, steps 4 through 10, and the results are we get God's will back, and we have faith and service. So here's a picture of our bridge when we cross over the shore of faith. And here are some promises.
The outlines and the promise of the new land had brought luster to tired eyes and fresh courage to flightless spirits. Friendly hands had stretched out in welcome. We were grateful that reason had brought us so far, but somehow we couldn't quite step ashore. Perhaps we'd been leaning too heavily on reason that last mile, and we did not like to lose our support. That was natural. But let us think a little more closely. Without knowing it, had we not been brought to where we stood by a certain kind of faith? For did we not believe in our own reasoning? Did we not have confidence in our ability to think? What was that but a sort of faith? Yes, we had been faithful, abjectly faithful to the God of reason. So in one way or another, we discovered that faith had been involved all the time. We found, too, that we had been worshipers. What a state of mental gooseflesh that used to bring on. Had we not variously worshipped people, sentiment, things, money, and ourselves? And then with a better motive, had we not worshipfully beheld the sunset, the sea, or a flower? Who of us have not loved something or somebody? How much did these feelings, these loves, these worships have to do with pure reason? Little or nothing, we saw at last. Were not these things the tissue out of which our lives were constructed? Did not these feelings, after all, determine the course of our existence? It was impossible to say we had no capacity for faith or love or worship. In one form or another, we have been living by faith and little else. Imagine life without faith. Were nothing left but pure reason, it wouldn't be life. But we believed in life. Of course we did. We could not prove life in the sense that you can prove a straight line is the shortest distance between 2 points. Yet, there it was. Could we still say the whole thing was nothing but a mass of electrons created out of nothing, meaning nothing, whirling on to a destiny of nothingness? Of course we couldn't. The electrons themselves seemed more intelligent than that. At least, so the chemists said. Hence, we saw that reason isn't everything. Neither is reason, as most of us use it, entirely dependable, though it emanate from our best minds. What about people who prove that man could never fly? Yet, we have been seeing another kind of flight, a spiritual liberation from this world, people who rose above their problems. They said God made these things possible, and we only smiled. We had seen spiritual release, but liked to tell ourselves it wasn't true. Actually,
In this next 2 paragraphs, we're going to find out where you find that higher power, or God, whatever you want to call it.
we were fooling ourselves, for deep down in every man, woman, and child is the fundamental idea of God. It may be obscured by calamity, by pomp, by worship of other things, but in some form or other it is there. For faith in a power greater than ourselves, and miraculous demonstrations of that power in human lives, are facts as old as man himself. We finally saw that faith in some kind of God was a part of our makeup, just as much as the feeling we have for a friend. Sometimes we had to search fearlessly, but he was there. He was as much a fact as we were. We found the great reality deep down within us. In the last analysis, it is only there that he may be found.
See that? Where you find your higher power, God, or whatever you want to call it, it's right here. It's an inside job. But the problem is, we didn't know it because we had it blocked with other things. Pomp, security, worship of other things like drugs and alcohol, people, gambling, anything. We blocked that higher power from us. And what this 12-step process is a garbage removal process. We get into the steps, we find out what is blocking us from that higher power. And that's where you find that. God isn't lost. We don't need to, look for him. He's inside of us. We've got to get rid of all that stuff, and that's where we find him. It's an inside job. He was there, always there, but we blocked him. Now we have to unblock that, unlearn, and find out where that higher power is. And it's an inside job. I love that song. One of the songs, when I found this out, is the song Hero by Mariah Carey. All right? Inside every one of us is a hero. Every one in these rooms are heroes. There's a higher power inside each one of us. Remember that. We're not bad people. We have an illness and we're trying to get ready. Let that hero out of you come out today. Thank you. Deep down inside every one of us is a higher power.
It was so with us. We can only clear the ground a bit. If our testimony helps sweep away prejudice, enables you to think honestly, encourages you to search diligently within yourself, then, if you wish, you can join us on the broad highway. With this attitude, you cannot fail. The consciousness of your belief is sure to come to you.
Okay, you have to search diligently within yourself. And this attitude, positive attitude, cannot fail. Now, this next one is a gentleman named Fitz Mayo, and this is how he removed his garbage and how he found a power greater than himself. He's also in the back of the book. He's the one that wrote Our Southern Friend, Fitz Mayo.
In this book, you will read the experience of a man who thought he was an atheist. His story is so interesting that some of it should be told now. His change of heart was dramatic, convincing, and moving. Our friend was a minister's son. He attended high school, where he became rebellious at what he thought an overdose of religious education. For years thereafter, he was dogged by trouble and frustration, business failure, insanity, fatal illness, suicide. These calamities in his immediate family embittered and depressed him. Post-war disillusionment, ever more serious alcoholism, impending mental and physical collapse brought him to the point of self-destruction. One night, when confined in a hospital, he was approached by an alcoholic who had known a spiritual experience. Our friend's gorge rose as he bitterly cried out, "If there is a God, he certainly hasn't done anything for me." But later, alone in his room, he asked himself this question: is it possible that all the religious people I have known are wrong? While pondering the answer, he felt as though he lived in hell. Then, like a thunderbolt, a great thought came. It crowded out all else. Who are you to say there is no God?
You hear that? Squiggly right and read it again. He asked himself this question: who are you to say there is no God?
This man recounts that he tumbled out of bed to his knees. In a few seconds, he was overwhelmed by a conviction of the presence of God.
He had a spiritual experience. 10% of us look like that. In seconds, we have a flash. God come to us. But 90% of us in the program have what we call a spiritual awakening, where we learn and we grow. You get it, but it's a slower process. He had a spiritual experience.
It poured over and through him with the certainty and majesty of a great tide at flood. The barriers he had built through the years were swept away. He stood in the presence of infinite power and love. He had stepped from bridge to shore. For the first time, he lived in conscious companionship with his Creator. Thus was our friend's cornerstone.
The cornerstone means he did step 2.
Fixed in place. No later vicissitude has shaken it. His alcoholic problem was taken away. That very night, years ago, it disappeared. Save for a few brief moments of temptation, the thought of drink has never returned. And at such times a great revulsion has risen up in him. Seemingly he could not drink even if he would. God had restored his sanity.
Step 11.
What is this but a miracle of healing? Yet its elements are simple. Circumstances made him willing to believe. He humbly offered himself to his Maker.
Step
He
3.
knew. Even so has God restored us all to our right minds. To this man, the revelation was sudden. Some of us go into it more slowly. But he has come to all who have honestly sought him. When we drew near to him, he disclosed himself to us.
It says right there, he has come to all who has honestly sought him. And Ruthie likes to say this on it too. It's in the seeking that you'll find that higher power. Step 2, come to believe that a power greater than ourselves can restore us to sanity. Next week we're going to stop right there today. It's a little short because next week we're going to get into how it works, chapter 5. And also we're going to talk a little bit more about the 3 legacies of Alcoholics Anonymous too before we get into that. There's 3 legacies in Alcoholics Anonymous. There's recovery, the 12 steps, what we go over this meeting. All right. Then there's unity, which is the 12 traditions. And then there is service, which is the 12 concepts. We'll get into more of that about next week. And next week we'll find out how it works, what the how means and what it is. And another thing that's cool about getting into how it works, you hear this before every meeting. You go to lead meeting, and people read how it works, and people here know it by heart. You know what I mean? But we're going to go through it and let you really listen to it and find out what it means about. So, without anything from me, I'm going to turn it back over to Spence.